One dark night, Lucy and Jonathan were walking in the cool air near the edge of town. They had spent a wonderful evening together with friends, but it was growing late, so Jonathan was walking Lucy to her home. They decided to cut through a patch of forest. Though the path had long been forgotten, Lucy and Jonathan knew where they were going. Along the way they talked and laughed together. Without warning, a stick snapped somewhere in the forest. As an eerie feeling descended upon the happy couple, Jonathan and Lucy stopped.
What was that?
Lucy asked.
I don't know, but it sounded big, whatever it was.
They listened intently but heard nothing more. They continued their journey when they heard another crack. Whatever was out there seemed to be pacing them. Jonathan raised his walking stick like a club. The tension grew ever stronger. Some bushes rustled. And then, Jonathan shouted as a large creature leapt onto him, snarling and growling. Lucy ran and didn't look back. Lucy soon left the forest and found herself upon the streets. She spotted a police inspector making his nightly rounds. She called out. The inspector stopped and waited for Lucy to catch up.
Inspector, my fiancé was attacked in the forest.
She said out of breath.
Come, miss,
The inspector replied. They both took off into the forest. Jonathan laid upon the ground covered in cuts, scratches and bites. He was clearly unconscious. His walking stick was broken, and a silver knife glinted in the moonlight. It was a tragic scene.
Lucy? Lucy, did you hear me?
Lucy snapped out of a trance. She was now in the clinic of Dr. Henry Moss, just hours after the attack.
I'm sorry, doctor. Can I see Jonathan?
She asked. Dr. Moss was very patient.
I'm afraid not at the moment. I have more cleaning to do first. But the good news is that Jonathan is stable.
Dr. Moss smiled, then he changed the subject.
What attacked him?
Lucy described what she saw, and firmly added.
It was a wolf.
The doctor thought a moment.
Are you sure? It's not common to find wolves in this area.
Lucy nodded her head. He then reassured her.
Well, I am sure that the police will find the animal. In any case, I will come get you when you can see Jonathan.
Lucy thanked him for his kindness. Dr. Moss then left the room. The next morning Lucy found herself at police headquarters along with Dr. Moss. Lucy asked him to come along while the nurses looked after Jonathan. They were in a cold room, staring at a beast lying on the table. Inspector Scrub, the chief police inspector, was there. The inspector explained.
We found this animal just off in the trees. It appears to have been stabbed. Is this the beast?
Indeed, it was the creature, and Lucy confirmed it. The beast certainly had some resemblance to a wolf, yet it didn't look normal. Dr. Moss commented.
There is something not quite right about this wolf. It looks diseased. I think we need to examine this animal. We want to make sure Jonathan hasn't been infected by it. I'll send for my colleague and mentor, Professor St. Clair. He is more skilled than I am in animal pathology.
Very well, but I must ask that we all keep this quiet. We don't want the town in a panic.
During the rest of the day, Dr. Moss examined the beast and extracted blood samples, while Lucy and the nurses attended to Jonathan. The next evening, Professor St. Clair had arrived in town. He met up with the doctor at police headquarters. The doctor and professor took a moment to catch up, then it was straight to business. The doctor relayed everything that had happened so far.
So, this is the creature?
The professor asked.
It is. Jonathan managed to stab the creature with his knife. It wandered off and died from what the inspector said.
The professor examined the wound carefully, then asked,
Where is the knife?
I have it right here.
Inspector Scrub gave the knife to Professor St. Clair. The professor took the knife and hit the blade on the edge of the table. A beautiful ringing noise reverberated around the room.
It's definitely silver.
Professor St. Clair muttered. Then he asked.
Henry, did you extract any blood from the beast?
Dr. Moss answered and took up a vial of blood sitting on a little table nearby.
There wasn't a lot left when I extracted some yesterday.
The professor carefully took the vial. He opened his bag and took out a bottle of clear liquid. St. Clair then mixed some clear liquid with the vial of blood. A few moments later, the color changed from red to sickly yellow.
It seems my suspicions are correct.
Professor St. Clair said to himself.
You're right, Henry. This creature is diseased. It has lycanthropy.
Dr. Moss and the chief inspector looked confused. The professor continued.
It is also known as wolf disease, and I have no doubt that Jonathan is infected.
How do you know?
The clear liquid that I poured into that vial of blood is a concoction of wolfsbane, or the aconite flower. It will turn the blood yellow if lycanthropy is present.
Then he said seriously.
What I'm about to tell you will be unbelievable and fantastic. I thought so too, however, I have learned much about this very subject which changed my views. This disease will cause the victim to become a wolf himself. If Jonathan is indeed infected, then he shall become a werewolf.
Dr. Moss was silent while the chief inspector couldn't believe the possibility.
I have more evidence that this wolf is cursed with the supernatural. The flesh surrounding the knife wound is singed, as if burned. Silver and wolfsbane are the only things that can harm such a creature.
He showed the wound to Dr. Moss and the police inspector to prove his point.
Now, we need to get back to Jonathan as quickly as possible. If what I believe is true, we have very little time.
Back at the clinic, the professor had already mixed Jonathan's blood with the clear liquid. Now they waited. In a few moments the liquid turned yellow. Professor St. Clair sighed.
It is as I feared. Please call for Lucy, she needs to know the truth.
When Professor St. Clair finished explaining everything to Lucy, he then said,
It is fortunate we made this discovery before the moon rises tonight. For tonight Jonathan shall transform at the full moon. When that happens we will only have a few hours to deliver the antidote. If we don't succeed when the moon sets, all will be lost and Jonathan will never be free from this curse.
Lucy listened as the professor explained everything. She wasn't sure if it was true or not, yet the professor was dead serious. Finally she made up her mind.
If what you say is true, I will do whatever I can to help my beloved.
Good, we may need you yet. Now, we will need to get everything set up. The antidote will only work once Jonathan is fully transformed.
The group formulated a plan together and got to work. The chief inspector chained Jonathan to the bed to keep him secured. Professor St. Clair and Dr. Moss carefully filled tranquilizer darts with the wolfsbane concoction. Lucy was instructed to talk to Jonathan to help distract him, while Dr. Moss and the professor administered the antidote. Then the four of them waited. The full moon began to rise. Everyone held their breath and watched. Jonathan then began to convulse and strain against the chains. He sprouted fur all over, and his clothes ripped. His face was disfigured, and in a matter of a minute or two, Jonathan had fully transformed. He snarled and snapped at the chains which bound him. No one could believe their eyes. Yet here it was just as Professor St. Clair predicted. Lucy, though afraid, stepped out to the center of the room and began to speak.
Jonathan, it's me. It's Lucy.
The werewolf focused its gaze on her. Snarling and spitting, it fought against the chains. As Dr. Moss aimed the tranquilizer, the werewolf broke through the restraints and sprinted towards Lucy.
Watch out!
Scrub shouted. Lucy got out of the way just in time. The werewolf tried to stop, but its momentum was too strong. It crashed through the window and fell to the ground below. Dr. Moss, the chief inspector and Professor St. Clair ran to the window. They saw the werewolf run off towards the forest. The professor cried out,
Quick, we must follow him. Lucy, stay here.
The three men left the house and ran towards the forest. They searched through the brush, all the while hearing a distant howling. After a couple of hours, Dr. Moss and the chief inspector began to feel all hope was lost.
He's ran off. We'll never catch him now,
the inspector said.
Nevertheless, we must try, or others could suffer his same fate,
the professor replied. They continued their search. Somewhere along the way, a low growl was heard. Dr. Moss raised the crossbow. The inspector had his pistol drawn. The tension was unbearable. Then in a flash, Dr. Moss was knocked to the ground as the werewolf pounced upon him. The inspector fired his gun, but to no avail. The werewolf then turned onto Inspector Scrub and knocked him down. The professor was frantically searching for a dart to shoot at the werewolf. As the werewolf leaned in to bite the chief inspector, Lucy appeared out of nowhere and screamed for Jonathan to stop. The beast turned towards Lucy and charged at her. She stood her ground ready for impact when the crossbow shot. A dart struck the werewolf in the back, and the beast collapsed to the ground. Professor St. Clair stood by and held the crossbow in his hands.
Are you all right?
Lucy looked shocked.
I'm all right. But what about Jonathan?
The antidote is working. Jonathan is returning to normal. Come, let us check on the others.
Fortunately, Dr. Moss only had a few bruises, scrapes, and scratches. Inspector Scrub was only banged up. Jonathan hadn't bitten anyone.
How did you get here so quickly, Lucy?
The professor asked.
I followed you out here.
Lucy answered.
I couldn't stand the thought of leaving Jonathan.
In time, Jonathan had fully transformed back into human form, and the four of them took Jonathan back to town. Now dressed in new clothes and in a new room, Jonathan finally looked peaceful. The professor drew another vial of blood and mixed it with the wolfsbane concoction. Yet the blood remained red. He sighed.
Jonathan is cured, and just in the nick of time.
He also checked the inspector and Dr. Moss, just to be safe. All was well, and Jonathan would eventually make a full, complete recovery.